Hey guys, Steven here, Fanatic Perspective. So the NFL Player Association has approved the new CBA with the players or with the NFL owners 2020 through 2030. I'm going to give my thoughts on the new deal, the new collective bargaining agreement that has now been ratified. And the way I look at it, and the reason why this channel is called Fanatic Perspective is because we have to look at this from a three-dimensional platform. We have the NFL owners, we have the NFL players, and we have the NFL fans. So this is just going to be my perspective, from the fans, just what I see and how this deal influences our viewing experience, what it means for the players, what it means for the owners, and then also my perspective as a Cowboys fan. How does this impact the Dak Prescott negotiations, the Amari Cooper negotiations, with now we have more of an established cap number as well. But before I get into all of that and we'll break everything down, I want to give a shout out to our video sponsors, Boss's Ranch. Guys, I went to HEB yesterday. For those of you here in the Central Texas area, people are going ham in the grocery stores right now, trying to combat the coronavirus as we go into self-isolation. And, in any moments like this, folks are acting crazy, but there's still some Boss's Ranch on the shelves. If this is the end of days, why not go out with the best ranch possible? Best Star Ranch in Texas. You can find them in the cold produce section. It's a little smelly over there because there's not a whole lot of cold produce left, at least at the grocery stores I visited. But there's still some bosses there for you to check out. Hit them up, HEB, cold produce. Can't go wrong with Boss's Ranch. So I've always been pro player as a fan, player empowerment and just seeing things from their perspective. We hear often millionaires versus billionaires, right? And this was a deal that was immediately passed initially by the owners. They were, I don't know if it was unanimous, but it was pretty strong majority amongst the owners for this new deal. And we knew for the last couple years, right? At first, there was actually talk of going to an 18 game schedule, but we knew about the 17 games. And actually, before I start that, let's kind of hit on the big things that were approved, because I think that that's something that we should kind of start out with, right? So we now will eventually go to 17 games. It won't be in the 2020 season, but it will be most likely the 2021 season going forward. And that 17th game I'll touch on because that's I have a platform here for cool ideas. So they approved 17 games. We will now go from 12 teams that make the playoffs to 14 teams that make the playoffs. So that will be 7 teams making the playoffs per conference, which now means that only one team, only the number one seed, will get a first round bye. Everyone else will play now in the first round. The revenue sharing pool, if you will, I believe goes from 47% to 48.5% or something around there. You can correct me in the comments if I'm mistaken there. And then the big carrot that the owners dangled in front of the players is you can now no longer be suspended for positive test of marijuana. So those are kind of the highlight things, right? We still diving into the healthcare ramifications for former players. I've heard some conflicting information there. There are some smaller things. Well, not so. Undrafted free agent contracts are going to go up. The roster sizes will go from 53 men to 55 men. Practice squad will increase, and then we will only have one franchise tag, which is just instead of the franchise tag and the transition tag, we'll just have one tag, which immediately impacts the Cowboys right off the bat. But from an owner's perspective, I think it's a huge win for them. More games, more money. You still hold majority control. It's not a 50-50 split in terms of revenue. And the biggest thing is now they get to go in and renegotiate these TV contracts this summer and really, really start to generate a massive, hold over not just the players and but sports entertainment as it is, because gambling revenue will now filter in. And with the ambiguity behind how the gambling dollars will be split between the government, between casinos, and how this outlook of sports gambling will look, you cannot tell me that the ones that will stand to benefit the most are those 32 owners. And then on top of that, the biggest thing that they come out with, because one of the shows I've been watching recently within our self-containment is Succession on HBO. It's a fantastic show. For those who haven't watched it, it's critically acclaimed. And it's about a family company that owns a big media conglomerate. It's a fictional based kind of like dramedy type show. But one of the main character, the father, the patriarch of the family, Logan Roy, one of the things he says all the time is, if you want to sit in the big boy chair, you have to be a killer. And for these owners, for these 32 owners, this is their field of play. This is how they made their money. This is how many of them became billionaires. I understand some of these are family legacy businesses where the person sitting in charge may not be self-made, if you will. But for the most part, they acquired these franchises or came into the positions of power because they are great sharks and killers when it comes to getting deals done. And when the trick that they use is they always find a carrot with their quote-unquote business partners, but the people that are their employees, which is the NFL players. And that carrot that they dangled was weed. Y'all want to smoke? Cool. Let's throw it out in front of you. Even though the way our country is going from a legislative perspective, from what the other major leagues are doing, whether it's baseball, NBA, and the discretion that they have when it comes to testing of marijuana, that's been in place with those other sports for several years now. You don't ever hear about players in those other leagues unless they're distribution to sell. They don't get busted for that stuff. But hey, we want to celebrate a victory for the players because, we get to smoke now, Steve. We get to get our tree. And it's an employee mentality on behalf of the players. But as an owner and these guys that are masters at crafting deals and getting what they want or getting as much as possible, hey, y'all smoke a little tree. We won't test you for it. We won't knock you for it. Josh Gordon, Randy Gregory, all you brothers that have been shut down in the past, we get to have you back. But, let's play an extra game. Let's get some more playoff revenue in there and, health, all that type of stuff. Oh, and we'll pay you pretty much the same rate moving forward. How does that sound? And the players fell for it. Now, I won't say they fell for it because from a union perspective, the vote broke down to, it was 1,019 players that voted yes and 959 players that voted no. And this was, I believe, the second vote because the first one did not pass and go through. And the way, for those who don't know this, all it takes for the deal to go through is it needs to be 50% plus one vote. That's all it takes. 50% plus one vote. Now we're talking about a 60 vote disparity here between yes and no. And on top of that, you had 500 guys that didn't vote. So that's almost one out of every 5 players that didn't vote. And that goes into my point with the players union, because these brothers allowed weed to be dangled in front of them to fool them. Just like in the last CBA, they allowed the OTAs to be dangled in front of them. And it's almost a red herring, if you will, with these players. So the union leadership and the union as a whole with the NFL is very, very weak. All right. If it was me, if I'm in charge of the union, just me, because I'm going to speak on the perspective of the fans here in a second. If it's me, we can't have a conversation until we're 50-50. Period. Major League Baseball. You can go into the dynamics or whatever. At the end of the day, according to Rob Manfred and some others, they have, I believe, a 50-50 revenue sharing split. The NBA has a 50-50 split in terms of basketball-related dollars, and the NHL has also a 50-50 revenue split. The NFL makes more money than all those guys in terms from a revenue perspective, right? But yet you guys are over here fighting for a plus 1.5% increase, but you're still not 50-50. That's employee mentality when you're looking at, oh, this short-term little thing, like, oh, we get to have 2 more revenue or 2 more roster spots, or we get to have less practices and we can smoke weed, but you're not really worried about the real dollars. You're not really worried about the dollars that affect you long-term, healthcare ramifications long-term. How many of you brothers right now in 2020 will be in the league in 2030? How many of you when the next collective bargaining agreement rolls around? Which leads me to another thing. Why wouldn't you have some sort of opt-out clause after 4 or 5 years in this? Right now we're dealing with coronavirus. We have a lot of uncertainty around gambling that's coming in. I would love for the players to get some sort of, some of that pot of the gambling money that's going to kick into play. The TV contracts aren't. Like, with all the uncertainty going on, you're going to agree to a 10-year deal and get locked in there. It's silliness to me. And you could tell a lot of players were against this because that's why the vote was so close. But when you have so many guys that are on minimum contracts and, the average length of time in the league is 2 to 3 years, they're looking for what they can get now. And unfortunately, the guys that really need to be, that are really going to be impacted by this, which is all of them, but in varying degrees, you have to come up with some sort of mechanism, and this is where the union leadership is at fault here, in my opinion. They have to have foresight. You should have seen this coming 2 years ago to say, hey, you know what? The only way we're going to get what we want from a 50-50 standpoint, the weed thing should have been a given, especially the way our country's going. But the 50-50 split, if we're going to play more games, and that's the big thing that the owners want, is more football games, then we've got to have other things in place to get us taken care of. We should have more than 55 spots on the team. And that doesn't even mean 55 active players on game day, by the way. They didn't increase that. Maybe by 2030 we'll get to 55 active guys on game day, but they're not even there yet. So when you factor all that in, these guys should have been creating some sort of mechanism in place, whether you're paying a tax to yourselves, some of the guys that are making a little bit more money, over $1 million a year, to put into a pot to take care of the guys that are at minimum and below, or not minimum below, that doesn't make sense, but the guys that are at, the mid-level to the minimum, to take care of them, because we understand a lot of these players, unfortunately, are living paycheck to paycheck. You have fans out here that will always be critical of players because the last thing that the fan wants is a lockout. They don't want them to go to strike. But if you're a player, the only way to get what you truly want, the only way to truly be 50-50 partners with the sharks, the killers that are the NFL owners, is to hit them where it hurts in their pockets, is to have a strike. And they don't even have the mechanism in place to do that. The way that the other leagues, you've seen the NBA had a strike before, the MLB has had strikes before, and that's why they have player empowerment today in their leagues that the NFL, quite frankly, does not have. So when you look at from a fan perspective, it's great for us. Switching hats, no lockout. It's the big win, right? We know we're going to have football. We have peace now for the next 10 years as a fan. And it's more football for us. Same benefit. A lot of the benefits that the owners share, we share as fans, because from a product standpoint, because the product is the players, right? And as fans, that's why you see a lot of fans on social media often side with the owners against the players, because the two things we get, no lockout and more football, are also benefits of the owners, right? So 14-team playoff. Hey, now you have, before you had 12 fan bases that were excited their team made the playoffs. Now you'll have 14 fan bases that are excited that their teams will make the playoffs. So other than that, I mean, you even look at the drug testing stuff. As a Cowboy fan, I no longer have to worry about Randy Gregory when he gets reinstated, whenever that happens, of him being held out against his will because of marijuana. Now I get to see, more of the better players on the field, unless they're testing positive for performance-enhancing drugs or any other nefarious, drugs that they may be taking. But in terms of marijuana, I get to have at least my guys available there. Doesn't hold me back, which is another benefit to the owners too. Last thing the owners want is to have the workforce reduced because of suspensions. They want those guys out there to help drive the revenue, drive the product. The 17th game, going over to the cool ideas part, because I'm hearing a lot of ideas around what they could possibly do with this 17th game, which is very, very intriguing as a fan. We hear about potential regional rivalries for all 32 teams. So, for example, if you're a Cowboys fan or a Texans fan, we would play each other every season. Now, the context and how we would play each other is very interesting. Could it be a neutral site game? Could it be a home and home every season? Could it be a game in Mexico? Who knows? But now, like in the state of Texas, you now have a legit state championship. Rams, Chargers, they could play that. There's a lot of things they could do. The state of Florida, the teams you have there, New York, what they decide to do there. So that's really, really intriguing to create those cross-conference rivalries, those interstate rivalries. I think that's tremendous for the fans. They've been talking about playing some of these rivalry games in college football stadiums. I've heard about like Notre Dame or Tuscaloosa, and really increasing the NFL footprint into areas that don't necessarily have NFL teams. That's really, really cool. And as a fan hearing that, I think it's genius marketing by the NFL. And I also hear, in terms of consumption as a fan, great. Whether it's partnering up with streaming services like Netflix. One of the biggest shifts we'll see over the next 10 years is how we all consume the game, especially for those who aren't necessarily attending games in person, right? So I imagine that there'll be an increased presence from a mobile perspective or tablets, and just really altering making this game even more accessible, more available for all fans. I think that's a big, big positive from this collective bargaining agreement. But I think at the end of the day, it's a win, obvious win for the owners, and a big win for the fans that football is no longer in jeopardy. But the ones that hold the bag again are the players. And we need to put pressure. I mean, I say we, the players, especially the brothers that are part of that 959. They've got to put some pressure on those other 500 who didn't show up, whether it was absentee or what. I don't know what the situation was, but the guys that did not vote, the guys that did not come forward, because it'd be different if everybody voted and it's straight up, hey, that's what y'all agreed to, then fine. But the owners are playing on y'all's instability. The owners are playing on the fact that they know all you guys aren't going to show up. They're playing on your ignorance. They're playing on the fact that they know a lot of you players are short-term thinkers with employee mindset. Okay, that's why moving over to the Cowboys, Dak Prescott was never going to sign a contract, thinking about CAA, Todd France, and what those guys are doing over there until this new money was going to kick in, period. Because they knew we signed old money and the salary cap's going to go up, TV dollars kick in, all this type of stuff. You guys are going to have our clients on an enormous discount moving forward when you factor in the greater pot and thinking on a macro scale. Too many players are thinking on a micro scale. And yes, everybody wants to do what's best for their family in the present time and currently. I get all that. But at some point, that's where the union has to step in and mobilize and do what's best for the common good. Because now, if I'm a player, say, coming into the league in 2022 through 2030, I have no say over what you guys just agreed to. So, there was no foresight of thinking, even from how they decided to have this vote, in my opinion. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with that. And just ending off with the Cowboys. I mean, I mentioned Dak Prescott earlier in terms of, I do think, we'll probably see a franchise tag for him. And, with the Amari Cooper thing, now that you don't have a second tag, I think they scrambled to get that deal wrapped up. The good thing is Amari Cooper and his agent, they have been in good communication and talks with Jerry and Steven. But I do carry some criticism towards Steven for always stringing these deals out and stringing out these negotiations. I don't think it's always beneficial for the team when they do that. And I think in this particular case, it may end up hurting the Cowboys. How much it hurts the Cowboys, we don't know. The cap, I believe now will go up to from 180 to 198 million. I think the ship is sailed with Byron Jones, just based on some of the comments I've heard from Will McClay in the last couple months. But we'll see how all that plays out instantly. At the time I'm recording this video, Ryan Tannehill, who's also represented by CAA and Todd France, has agreed to a large extension with the Tennessee Titans. I think he got like 60 plus million fully guaranteed, and I think 91 million in total guarantees, almost $30 million a year. So if he can play half a season and have a nice little run, Dak Prescott had a run of 4 years, and you're talking about 33 million versus the 30 million that Ryan Tannehill got, forget about it. So, guys, those are my thoughts on just the CBA and just what I'm seeing today. I'm going to continue to try to deep dive into the healthcare portion ramifications. And if there's anything intriguing or interesting I see there, I'll make another video about it. But expect more content as we are kind of in a hiatus from sports right now and kind of figuring things out in this new world that we're in. But most importantly, please be safe, wash your hands, and be considerate of others while you're out there. Hit me up in the comments if you like what you saw. Please like, share, subscribe, share our channel with others. Appreciate you guys. I'm out.